Hi, this is Videomaster Inquiry Johannesson, and we're going to look at the last round game from the London Chess Classic today between Levon Aronian and Magnus Carlsen. Now this is a very intriguing matchup because here we have the world number one and arguably what many consider the second best player in the world, Levon Aronian. He's currently rated number 4 in the world, but most people consider that Levon Aronian has had the best 2017 of all the chess players in the world. And many consider this to be a likely World Chess Championship match in 2018. So a lot at stake here, and the Magnus needed to avoid the loss here to secure the Grand Chess Tour. Now Levon opened with d4, and we saw e6 from Magnus. Now this invites e4, which would transpose into the French defense. So if Levon wanted to channel his inner AlphaZero, that probably would have been the choice, but he went with knight f3 and now c5. Here we could have a funny transposition if Aronian went with e4, because now all of a sudden we're playing the Sicilian, but Aronian went with g3, and after c takes d4, knight takes d4. The most common move is to play d5, and then we would have a Grunfeld with colors reversed. But it was clear that both players were avoiding well-known lines here with queen b6, and perhaps holding a little bit onto their weapons if the World Championship match were to become a reality. Bishop d2, bishop to c5, attacking the knight, which can't move because of the threat here by the queen and the bishop on f2. So e3 is more or less a forced move, and now d5. And now Aronian played queen g4, which attacks the pawn on g7. And you don't really want to play g6 to weaken your pawns, or king f8 to lose castling rights, so bishop f8 retreating is a normal move. Now you're losing time by moving the bishop back and forth, but black will Black will regain the tempo by moving his knight to f6. So white castles, and now knight f6 hitting the queen, so the queen has to move back. And now e5. So black has gained an impressive center, but white goes for the queen trade here. Bishop d7. You don't really want to help white by taking, because then you have to deal with the threat here on c7, and you're a bit behind in development. So bishop d7 develops a piece and hits the queen. So this is better for black, even though you get double pawns here. They're not really that bad, because you control some squares and you opened your rook indirectly. And in general, these pawns aren't considered that bad, even though we're taught that double pawns are usually bad. But that's not always the case. Knight c6, bishop d2, and now in the post-game interview, Carlsen was not happy with this move, bishop d6. He said that he completely missed the idea that Aronian played with knight c3 and then a4. And this kind of forces black to surrender the bishop here, because now knight b5 comes, supported by this pawn here. If you're trying to get too fancy, then a move like this of course doesn't work. Your opponent doesn't always go with your plans. If rook takes a4, bishop takes b5 is what black wants, but we just play knight takes d6, and that's all she wrote. So knight b5. You don't want to play a move like bishop b8, because you disconnect your rooks, and white might play a move like bishop b4, and white's pieces are getting quite active. So Carlsen goes for bishop takes b5, giving up the double pawns, but on the other hand also tying down these pawns, which lose a lot of their flexibility. Rook a to c8. Aronian elects to protect the c2 pawn indirectly with bishop c3. We have h5. Rook ft1. Both of white's rooks are on open files, and I think we can say that white is better here. He has the bishop here and easier targets. Rook fd8 by Carlsen. Knight d2. Logical play by Aronian. This knight here on b3 doesn't really have a function at the moment. All these squares are covered, so you need to reposition this knight, and he goes with knight d2. After h4, knight f3. hitting this pawn. Carlsen flicks in h takes g3, otherwise that pawn will be lost, and now e4. But this of course gives more scope to this bishop, gives white the d4 square, and perhaps he should have gone knight d4, that's also an option, but he went with knight to g5. Now knight g6 by Carlsen, rook a7, attacking the pawn on b7. It's clear that black is on the defensive here, white has the better position. Rook b8, bishop to d4, hitting b6, so bishop c5 was played. Aronian took, and now c4. And this is to undermine the center for black here. Almost no matter what you do, you're going to have problems, especially with the e4 pawn. Knight d7 was played, and now c takes d5. And knight d7 was actually probably a good move, because now we see knight c8, rook a4, and after some maneuvering, knight b6 hitting the rook, rook a3, knight c4, rook c3, the knight comes back to d6, and we already saw this blockading knight in one of AlphaZero's games. And of course this is a well-known concept from Nimzowitsch, the blockade. The knight stands excellently there. It's blocking the pass pawn on d5, but also influencing play around the board, protecting the e4 pawn and protecting the b7 pawn, and can't really be attacked. There's no pawn that can attack it, no bishop, so this is an excellent knight. So even though white wins a pawn here with rook takes c5, Carlsen said he was happy with giving up some pawns here, because he felt he had at least stabilized the position a bit. So rook a8, going to the open file, bishop h3, and already after this, rook e8, rook c7, and king f8. Aronian committed to a piece sacrifice here. He can play b6. He played b6. He can play bishop f1, which would give his knight a square here on h3 in case of rook e5. But then black can play this, trying to kind of force b6 and then go back and get the rook over here to the b4 square, where you attack these pawns and you at least get one pawn back. Go back, b6 was played, and rook e5. Now this hits the knight, and this knight has no squares, so we're more or less committed here to knight e6 check, which is what Aronian played. F takes e6 and d takes e6, and he said after the game that he felt like his position was so good that he should be going for like the death blow here. Knight f e8, protecting this knight, which was attacked by the rook on d1, and now rook d7. And here is perhaps the critical point of the game. Aronian played b4 here. Both players agreed that Aronian should have just accepted that this was a draw. He had been better for the last couple of moves and felt like he should have been winning, but he should have gone for the draw here. Rook 1 takes d6, and there's actually a very forcing line here if both sides want, with rook to d5. White must take this more or less. e7 check, king takes, and white's going to win this pawn on b7, so he doesn't have to worry about the passed pawn for black. Bishop takes b7, rook takes b6, and this is just a draw. Black can't make no progress with two pawns here, and I mean, if I wanted to try to win, I would try to win with the white pieces, but this is should be a dead draw. But Aronian wanted more. He played b4, but now rook d5 and rook takes d6 is no longer on the agenda, so white must prove compensation for a piece here. He played rook a1, rook b5, the rook enters to a8, and now because of the pin here, we're threatening rook takes d6. The knight is pinned, but rook takes b6 simply covers the knight, so now it's only two pawns for the piece, and white is struggling to bring more firepower to the attack here. The bishop can't go to h5 because of the rook, so it seems like black will slowly but surely consolidate here. King g2 shows that white doesn't really have anything going for him. Rook takes b4. Now it's only one pawn. White tries to swing the rook over, but it doesn't really do much. Rook b to b5. He played bishop e2. I mean, rook h1, you're threatening mate in 1, but that's easy to meet with king g8, no more mate. So going back, he went bishop e2. Rook b2, bishop went back to g4. But now all of a sudden it's black who's on the offensive. And Aronian decided to try and bring his king closer to get something going. But it was simply too late. g5 check. And the problem with king here is probably knight f6 check. So king h5, and this gives up another piece. Trying to get a mating attack going, but Carlsen has everything under control. Rook f2, not allowing any rook activation with rook f1. e7 check, king g8. Now rook takes d6. A final trick for black to avoid. If you take this, there's rook a8, and remarkably you can only interpose twice and you get mated. And here I would make a rook here. It's the most aesthetic. But of course, being the world champion, Magnus is not going to fall for this, and he played rook h7, and this forced resignation from Aronian. If we try something like rook a8, simple solution is rook g7, king h5. If you go to h6, you're even checkmated here, and just king f7 covering the knight. And now black is threatening g4 and rook h2 mate, and he's already up a piece, so nothing to be done here for white. So Aronian resigned, and Carlsen is the winner of the 2017 Grand Chess Tour for the second time. Congrats to Magnus. He also won in 2015, but he said himself that that wasn't really justified, so he felt a bit better about this one, even though he didn't play his best at the London Chess Classic. But yep, that was an interesting matchup, and I hope we see Aronian make it through the candidates. He's kind of one of my favorite players, and I think it would make an interesting match, but okay, only the future will tell. So I hope you enjoyed this one. I tried the blue color this time. I think people like it better, and I think I will stick to that. Let me know what you think. I'll see you later. Bye bye.